I'll be back.
And you will know my name is the Lord. I'm walking here. I'm walking here.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Groovy.
Or it could be the Planet of the Apes. I don't know. We just need to keep the apes contained.
I don't know. I think the Planet of the Apes were doing pretty fucking good. I'd like to be part of the Planet of the Apes.
You kid. They'll never make a monkey out of you, Mike.
Can I leave that in?
You can. That's exactly the kind of lead-in people want. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Box Office Pulp, your one-stop podcast for movies, madness, and moxie. I'm your host, Cody. Joining me tonight for a mini-bop is my co-host, Mike. Now, Mike, tell me, do you want to be buried in a pet cemetery? Because I know I don't want to live my life again.
I was curious, exactly how far into the episode we would just start quoting the song.
I'm going to be honest here. I really, really enjoyed the cover.
I was listening to the cover before we got on.
It's so catchy.
I listen to it every single day.
It cracks me up because I had to go back and listen to the original from the Ramones to see if it was as silly as the cover made it, and it definitely is.
It's a silly fucking song.
Follow Victor to the sacred place. This ain't a dream I can't escape. Molars and fangs, the clicking of bones. Spirits moaning among the tombstones. And the night, when the moon is bright, someone cries something ain't right. I like how the Ramones were like, what are we putting here? Molars and fangs. That'll do.
It is such an inappropriate song for the story and the film.
Oh, God, yeah. In the original and the remake. I like how the remake was kind of like, okay, well, it's tradition now. We got to put it in.
The remake at least makes it work slightly
ending.
more. It has that dark humor, fucking American Werewolf in London kind of thing going on with the cut to it.
Yeah.
The original, it doesn't work at all.
Yeah. I think it subverts how goddamn grim the ending of the movie is. If we kind of end on this cover of a Ramones song, it makes it feel kind of like a joke. Like, boy, aren't we glad that's all over? Don't bury your kid in the pet cemetery, you doofuses. Good night. So
that's the moral of the story. Don't bury your kids in the pet cemetery.
That's it. I think we should get our facts straight. Don't bury your kids in the pet cemetery. It's for pets, not people. And the pets are questionable too.
Beware the Wendigo.
Also that. So before we get too far off the rails here, I don't think we actually exchanged our real thoughts on the movie so much, like if I were to thumbs up or thumbs down it. So I'll just get that out in the air. I left the movie with a vague sense of disappointment, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. But over the last week, as I've kind of sat and thought about the movie, as I've gone back and tried reading the book, I did not make it all the way through because that motherfucker is almost 600 pages long. Stephen King, why do you do this to me? But after reflecting on it more, I really want to go see it again. The longer it sits in my head, the more I appreciate what I saw. So by the time this hits Blu-ray, I'll probably be wearing a fucking Pet Sematary t-shirt and all about this thing.
Little foam finger.
A #1 Pet Sematary fan, and it's just a bunch of cat bones over a foam finger.
You're watching it wearing the fucking cat mask.
Woo!
Should be delightful,
my boy
actually.
Church!
Well, Church is the best. You've had pretty much the same reaction I did. I walked away not really, probably preferring it to the original. I'm not the biggest Pet Sematary fan in the world.
Yeah.
If I were to say, which one is objectively a better made film, I would say the original.
Really? I would opposite on this one. I think this one is hands down technically a much better film than the original. I think there's some kind of wonky stuff going on in that bad boy. But I also haven't seen it in years, so maybe on reflection I'm wrong. I don't know.
I would say probably on a technical standpoint, definitely the new one. It's there's give or take. I feel like if you were to cram both films together, you'd have the perfect Pet Sematary adaptation. As it kind of stands now, I think the original has a lot of weaknesses that are the exact opposite of the strengths of the new one, and the new one has a lot of weaknesses that are the exact opposite of the weaknesses of the original. I prefer the new one out of the adaptions, but I did walk away kind of going like that should have been more. Like I don't know why it should have been more. I don't know what it needed more of, but I'm disappointed, kind of. But it's like you, it's like percolated in my head, and I haven't quite stopped thinking about it. And at least for me, I think it comes down to it does the themes of the story much better than the original for me.
Yeah.
So, and I think it does more interesting things with them. Like one thing that I like has really struck me that I really like Rachel and Lewis's relationship. I love how for this film it's very subdued. Like their conversations about death don't erupt into hostility.
That was one of the weird things going back to the book. I've never actually read Pet Sematary before, so after watching the movie, I figured, oh, I should read the source material. And in there, Lewis and Rachel have this huge fight. I think King describes it as like the worst of their marriage to that point, over the fact that Lewis tells his daughter about death and tries to convince her it's just a normal part of life. So if Church dies, it's sad, but it's just something that she'll have to live with. And Rachel is completely opposed to the idea of telling their daughter, yeah, no, death is a thing that happens. Don't worry about it. So it's kind of a surprise. Like it's a different dynamic than maybe you get from the source material. But again, the source material is something like 550 pages long, and you cannot fit all of that into an hour and a half long movie.
Yeah.
So streamlining it and taking out some of those fights probably is a boon to the movie.
And it makes the relationship, and it makes the relationship easier to watch. The theme of the movie, boiled down to that kind of argument between Lewis and Rachel is an argument, then it's people screaming the themes of the film at one another, which to me hurts the film overall. Like, the original for me does emotion a little bit better. Like it's such a very morose, not more morose than this film. This film is very like dark and somber. But the emotions in the original are almost arch. Like it's kind of ridiculous at times. I'm not saying it's not a classic because it is, but
yeah, that's one of my memories of the original, just being melodramatic.
It's super melodramatic.
I would say there's a line in the original. They go from melodramatic. They really push these emotions to extremes, kind of more theatric. And the new one plays it a little more cool, which I'm perfectly happy with. I really love the performances from everyone, actually, in this new version. Jason Clarke is... I secretly have like a huge crush on this man. Like everything he's in, I'm always like, yeah, he made that better. Even when it's a bad Terminator movie, I'm still like, well, it had Jason Clarke. I just enjoy everything he does. So he was great here as Lewis. John Lithgow I was a little nervous about because he decided to not go with that classic Maine accent. But that's probably for the best, because if he was trying to do the Maine voice, you wouldn't be able to help but think about the original movie the entire time.
I actually learned today that he was supposed to do the Maine accent almost up to filming. He did the table read with a Maine accent.
Yeah, the directors were on the Shockwaves podcast last week, I think, and the directors talked to Lithgow, and Lithgow proved he could do it. Apparently, he had to do it on like a Saturday Night Live or something years ago, so he's proficient at it. And Lithgow wanted them to decide if he should use it or not, and they wanted Lithgow to pick what he was comfortable with. And Lithgow said he wasn't going to do it. He showed it to the table read, did it, and then he just said, "Well, I wanted to show you I could do it, but I'm not going to do it." Then, as Judd, he just did not have the Maine accent.
I think it works.
I think
better.
it was the smart choice. Yeah.
Yeah. According to the interview I was listening to them with them earlier today, he had worked with Gwen in the past.
Yeah. They were actually close friends, apparently.
Yeah. So he didn't. They actually got into a thing where they also realized anybody doing a Maine accent would just sound like they were doing an imitation of Gwen at that point.
For sure.
So, and he just didn't want to do it out of respect for Gwen because it would put their performances too close to one another.
Yeah. I will say, sometimes I talk down about the original. Fred Gwynne is by and far one of my favorite horror characters out there. Just dead is better. Every horror fan out there has said that line hundreds of times.
Legendary.
He's phenomenal. Yeah, he in my opinion, he makes that movie. So I appreciate the thought of this of, let's pump the brakes. Let's not make these two characters identical, even though they're both playing the same form of the character. Doesn't matter, it's a part of the book. Doesn't matter that, yes, the guy has lived his entire life in this small Maine town. He should sound like he's from Maine. Go ahead and try something a little different so we can help differentiate the products in our minds.
And he's much more toned down anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, until he's about to be, spoilers, murdered. Then you get that brief outburst of like action movie John Lithgow as he's being stabbed to death, which was fascinating.
Then you get some full Lithgow, and it's wonderful.
I want a preview. I want a prequel movie of John Lithgow in like his 50s in Nam or something weird.
Battling the supernatural.
He's not even fighting the Vietnamese. He's not in the Vietnam War. He's just in Vietnam fighting supernatural monsters there.
He's a shaman. I want to see this so bad now.
Actually, now I'm on board with this stupid idea I just made up. Yes, I'm all for it.
Print the money.
But to roll back a little bit here, I might be biased towards this movie too because the directors Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Widmer, their previous film Starry Eyes, I think is absolutely phenomenal. I love Starry Eyes.
Good.
Oh yeah, and I want them to have more opportunities because god damn it, Starry Eyes was so good. These guys deserve all the chances they can get. So maybe I'm being more forgiving of Pet Sematary because I like the production folks involved here. I don't know. It's tough to say outright. Plus, I think when it comes to horror films in general, they kind of get sandwiched between outright dismissals from audiences at large. So they'll just say something like, "Oh, there's a lot of jump scares. That doesn't make it a good movie. It's just an experience." Or really hypercritical takes from the hardcore fans. They're like, "Oh, well, we already saw this in that movie, and this is similar to that movie, but we didn't get to see the monster." There's a really fine line you have to work as a horror film to get casual audiences and hardcore genre fans to appreciate you. Not a lot of movies can make that work.
Yeah.
And even worse, when you're a horror remake that's also based on a Stephen King book, everyone's gunning for your head before you even hit theaters. Because I think I had the same reaction everyone had. When this movie was announced, I kind of went, why? Why do we need another Pet Sematary? Isn't it going to be exactly the same as the book and the movie? They're both, fairly similar already. What is this one going to do that's different? So folks went in with this attitude of, I already love the source material. I already love the original movie. Why do I need this? It's a little surprising, too. You go online and look at reviews from folks, and they're generally not great. Most folks came away not liking this movie. The hardcore horror fans, I saw some outspoken fans on Twitter, but they were kind of overwhelmed after the initial pledge of support by everyone else going, this didn't do anything for me, which bums me out because overall, even if I left vaguely disappointed, I still think this was much better made than most other horror films that I've seen in theaters recently.
Very much so. Honestly, everyone was going to have this polarizing reaction unless it was the quality of it, which...
Or it was flat out actually really terrible, and then everyone could just go, "Oh, that was bad. We didn't need this."
Yeah, it needed to be one of the polls. It was either going to be the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever. And the fact that it's really good. Is it great? I don't think it's great. But that doesn't mean it's not average. It's not bad. It's very well made. It's very well done. It does really interesting things. It has stuff to say.
I love the atmosphere of it. It's definitely, so good. I think, a great movie I could put on for Halloween when I want something spooky. Just the images of Judd and Lewis walking through those foggy trails in the middle of the night to go up to the burial grounds. That alone is worth the price of admission for me. I love those shots.
Oh, the trek to the ancient burial grounds just becoming more and more ethereal as the trail goes on, and like that swamp of bones.
Yes,
that they're
when they get into the
through.
swamp and the camera sinks down below the water and you just see it's all bones under the water line, that the characters don't even know that they're walking through a boneyard. I love that. That's amazing.
It's so good.
Or the Wendigo when it's off camera kind of walking around the area and Judd gives the "it's just loons" comment. That scene too is so much fun. Just the look Lewis gives him when he says it's just loons is fantastic. And the atmosphere there as well is amazing. You're in this dark, spooky woods, and you hear wonderful sound design of something breaking all these branches, walking around off camera. and they just have to ignore it and keep moving on into this area that's more and more not right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tension there. That scene is absolutely phenomenal.
Not right is a really good way of putting it. Like, I've rarely seen a tone designed around not right. That's really what they went for. Like, and that's
Oh
what
no,
Pet
wait.
Cemetery to me is. Like, that's what the horror of the book of the story is, and it's something that's kind of like not quite adaptable. And I think this
That's
comes a
it.
lot
How do you
closer to it.
communicate that thing to the audience?
Yeah.
It's so hard because in the book you can just have characters commenting, the atmosphere felt oddly electric and I was at ill ease and I felt nauseous or my skin got clammy. You can't tell any of that from a theater. You have to somehow visually communicate to the audience nothing about this world is right and they know they're making the wrong choice, but they can't stop.
Yeah, Pet Cemetery as a story is very ethereal and off-putting, and like the horror of like Gage coming back and even Church. It's it's hard to get across in a film because the idea is this thing being in the room with you is an aberration, like it's wrong, and that's where the horror comes from, and that's you can't really translate that very well without it seeming like a possession story. And I think this did a better job as an adaptation of. It didn't quite get there because I just don't think that's super adaptable, but this came very close to capturing it by
Mm.
moving it to just the overall vibe of the film, like we were saying, but also moving it to Ellie,
Oh yeah.
because she can vocalize what she's going through. And since she's the one asking all the questions and then she's the one realizing she's dead, it comes across that this isn't like a purely possessed person. This isn't just, a zombie back from the dead or something else. If it were Gage, this is something that's you've never seen before. It's just not right. It's purely unnatural.
Yeah, in the book, when Church first comes back, Lewis like freaks out and Church licks his hand. And Lewis kind of freaks out because he mentions Church's tongue was ice cold, which is great little detail in the book. You can put that in there and it doesn't seem intrusive. In a movie, there's no great way to
Yeah.
communicate that. Like, unless he jumps back and he goes, "Oh, the cat's tongue is cold," which just seems like very clunky filmmaking. So I love the details that they put into making the cat look distressed.
Yeah.
The cat looks the same, but with a new hairdo. Once he comes back from the grave, just the kind of tufted fur and stuff, he doesn't look right. There's a lot of wonderful little visual storytelling quirks they use to get across all these points. When Ellie comes back and she kind of has like one swollen, lazy eye.
Oh, that was a great subtle little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, there's all those little touches, or just all the amount of dirt they apply to any of her costumes or her skin, the kind of greenish shade she has, just little things like that before you even get to the big stuff, like noticing she still has staples in the back of her head. They do so much right in communicating without having to have a character say every little piece that you need to learn. And I appreciate the faith they put into the audience to go along with them and pick up those cues.
Yeah. It's a lot of I think horror storytelling you don't see in maybe studio horror flicks. That's where you can tell it's coming from some indie directors. These are the people who made Starry Eyes.
Mhm.
Because that off kilter kind of directing.
Yeah. So you alluded to it before, but one of the bigger changes that most of the discussion is focused on in this movie is the switch from Gage being the killer to Ellie being the killer, which I actually don't think is worth spending much time talking about. A lot of people seem upset by this move, but I think it makes all the sense in the world to do it that way.
Yeah,
I
I don't
mean,
know why people
if
made such a big deal out of it.
I don't know. I mean, with that change, you have now a performer instead of just a little kid. In my mind, it was hard to go along with the original Pet Cemetery film because seeing Gage in action was kind of hilarious. In this one,
Yeah.
Ellie, she is a great little actress. So now that she can play evil, you can have a real performance to go with your monster. That's fantastic. That gives your movie so much more life. For that reason alone, I think that's why you would go with that choice. But I don't know. She's also had philosophical discussions with her father throughout the movie about life and death, so it makes a lot more sense to me thematically to have her be the one that comes back
Yeah.
instead of Gage. I like all that, so I don't know. I don't think it's worth going much further into it. The bigger change that I think merits discussion is in Judd's motivation. So in the book, he's got what I kind of think of as like three main reasons for showing Lewis where the ancient burial ground is. He sits him down for a couple of evening beers and he tells him what's going through his head. One is he mentions he kind of wanted to help teach his family a lesson. Rachel has such a disdain for discussing death, and it's so obvious that Judd thinks, well, his kids are never going to learn about the nature of life and death unless, her cat comes back and she realizes it's not the same cat and the cat was maybe better off dead. And when the cat dies, she'll be maybe relieved to have her cat gone so she doesn't have to worry about that difference anymore, which is a really neat point, but one that would be very hard to communicate, I think, properly in the movie, because you'd have to get into a much, much deeper philosophical discussion than the film can afford to jump into.
Yeah.
Two, he says he needed to repay a favor to Lewis, because in the book, Lewis is able to save Judd's wife, Norma, when she suffers a heart attack on Halloween. Well, they rewrote the movie to have Norma be already deceased by the time the film starts, which I think makes sense because you pare down the number of characters you have to worry about, and her subplot really doesn't add all that much to the movie. Putting another death in there, I think, would just kind of bloat the runtime. But if you remove Norma, then you kind of remove that idea of a favor, and you have to readjust the motivation for Judd. So in the film, what they did this time is Judd wants to save Church because he really loves Ellie. Ellie was, the kid who came over to his house and wants to hang out and, bring him baked goods and talk to him on Halloween. And apparently Judd is just a lonely person in this form of the movie. So a little kid who's nice to him is something he can't help but want to do a favor back for. Yeah. I think that's actually a great way to adjust the movie to still have an internal logic that overcame some of the pruning they had to do from the source material. So they kind of swapped everything internally, but it still gets you to the same location. I think that was pretty smart. And the big thing was, I think we're on the same page. The last part here is Judd admitting that he was compelled to visit the grave and he had to think of reasons to justify it. So in the original film, the Wendigo is at best hinted at in the corners. I don't think they ever say the words Wendigo.
It's not in the original film at all.
No, there's maybe little things like odd noises when they're in the pet cemetery. That's essentially it. This one pushes it a little further. I would have, as a monster fan, been delighted if they'd gone even further and shown more hints of the Wendigo, but we got enough of a tease here to keep you moving, and I kind of like the supernatural hints that they give that Judd can't control himself, that he's kind of being coerced into doing this stuff. And it adds that inevitable doom kind of sensation to all the proceedings of the movie. So it's supposed to be a morality tale, but that morose doom over everything helps pull it all together.
The entire film seems so doomed from the outset. That's why I love how the first shot you see is actually from after the credits roll. So you actually start from after the ending of the film. So you're just immediately starting off with something horrible is happening at all times.
I mean, it's Pet Sematary, so I already knew, no one's getting out of this in good shape.
Oh, yeah.
Which, did you see Stephen King's proposed happy ending to the Pet Sematary remake?
I love how that's Stephen King's happy ending.
It was, for our listeners at home, the article I'm talking about, Stephen King the other day said, oh, well, I threw out a suggestion that they could end the movie on a happy note if everything happens the same way, but Gage isn't in the minivan at the end of the movie anymore. He's walking down the road and you see a truck coming along and you think, oh man, the kid's going to get killed by a truck. They're going to end on that. And at the last minute, some good Samaritan pulls over and grabs the kid and drives him away. So there's still hope that Gage can live on with a new family and not have to worry about, his zombie parents, which I'm very glad they did not do. But
that would have been terrible.
That would have been rough. I guess we're to the point of discussing the ending. Boy, did I love the ending. I'm sure some people were probably a little disarmed by it, considering it's even more distasteful, I would say, than somehow the book Stephen King almost didn't publish because he thought it was too distasteful.
Apparently the alternate ending that's going to be on the Blu-ray is apparently even worse somehow.
Awesome.
Which makes me very excited to see it. I think they said the studio's going to release it online to advertise the Blu-ray release.
That's an interesting way about it. Here's the end of our movie. Please buy the rest of it.
But yeah, I was pretty okay, I'm going with the movie, but for the most part, it was like, whatever. The second Ellie dies and it goes off the reservation,
Yes.
and then heading towards that fucking ending, I was in love with everything happening. It may be happening a little bit too fast. I would like some more breathing room in the film, but damn, like as we approach that ending, like as soon as like Ellie's dragging Lewis into the fucking graveyard, it's like I have no idea what's about to happen, and I'm so happy right now.
Even before that, the scene where Ellie hugs her mom and Rachel just can't return the hug because she's just so
Yes.
freaked out by this whole thing. That for me was the turning point. Everything from there, I was locked and ready to go. This was phenomenal. The acting in that scene, it's just, oh boy, that's got to be a tough one. Hey, pretend you're a mom who just lost her kid, and now you have a zombie version of the kid in the room that you can't stand. Amy Seimetz just destroys that scene, just the panic on her face.
Simons
Oh
is so
man,
good. And it's such a great like turnaround. Like once again, this movie like hones in on the themes of Pet Cemetery much better as an adaptation, I think. In that
yeah.
you get to see like Lewis, the one who's very pragmatic about death, is the one who can't handle it. And the one who Rachel, the one who avoids death, is the one who's able to reject the aberration in the room.
And I also like the part where as she's dying, she gets out the line, "Don't bury me in that fucking pet cemetery," which I think is a little bit of a rebuke to the original film, where well, yeah, I guess in the book, it
That's in the
ends pretty
book
much the
too.
same way. He takes his wife into the pet cemetery, and she comes back from the grave. I honestly, the old version of the movie kind of bummed me out because you have like that slow-mo shot
The
and cuts
knife
to
shot.
credits.
Oh,
Yeah, and then you just hear the "Oh God!" as he's being stabbed to death off camera. Like that never clicked with me. I didn't like the way it was filmed or portrayed.
yeah.
So in this one, to have the character flat out say like, "Don't you goddamn do the stupidest thing in the world," was nice. It doesn't work, but it's nice. So yeah, God, that scene is phenomenal. Like, there's so much tension there, and then all the stuff that follows, where it kind of turns into like a weird slasher film for a couple minutes.
Yeah, that was great. Like, and just a little bit of hints that um there's like some kind of supernatural strength to Ellie, like when she's throwing herself against the
Yeah.
door and whatnot. Like, it's never overt, but you can just see her do things that she shouldn't be able to do. Of course, then there's all the
Oh
like
right.
the her transforming into different people, but
Yeah. Which was great. I really appreciated that
I love the whole
confrontation
Norma scene. Yeah,
with Judd. Yeah, we finally get to see Norma, and there's all that backstory that gets brought up in a flash, and you just realize like, oh man, this is terrible, Judd. Oh man, this is terrible for Judd. Not only is his foot like half sawn off, but now he's dealing with this. Oof. Plus the body horror of the kind of Zelda flashback thing
yeah,
that happens shortly after. Oof. I know a lot of people will always go to bat for the original film's version of Zelda because that is, I mean,
terrifying.
absolutely chilling. That
Yeah,
yeah, terrifying. Zelda in the original is terrifying. Uh, but in this version, Zelda is, I would say, terrifying in a different manner. Like, she's not as in your face terrifying as the original was meant to be. This is probably more of a subdued kind of version of Zelda. But when Rachel sees herself in that bed transforming into Zelda, oof,
yeah.
that gets to
That's
me now.
rough. Yeah, just like surprise body horror always works for me. Uh, And I'm glad they didn't try to match Zelda in the original because you can't.
No, that's one
Um,
of those things where it would be the same as trying to have John Lithgow do the "dead is better" accent. It's only going to make you think exactly of the original and compare it to it negatively.
yeah, apparently they cut out a lot of Zelda scenes as well for that reason. I think it was a
I
good
feel we
move.
got
Zelda
enough the
being
way it
like,
was.
yeah, Zelda being like this peripheral thing, like in Rachel's mind, I think works a lot better. And then
Yeah.
so that way you can build up to that body horror scene that just where things just get weird. Where Ellie's in the room, but she's not in the room, and
I mean, I don't want to get too far into discussing fan theories about what it all means because why not? Everyone can do that in their own time. But I do have to wonder if that's trying to set up the idea that if you are buried in the pet cemetery and the Wendigo possesses your body, if the soul is supposed to be consigned to hell after that, like there's an actual damnation for dabbling with the supernatural.
perhaps I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if there's anything in the text to actually support that idea, other than earlier Zelda has the line, one day you'll be in this bed forever and you'll never leave it again. and just thinking kind of the cruel irony of what if that's what happens to her? Like her soul is essentially confined to hell, and her version of hell is being trapped in that body, stuck in that bed forever. It's even more terrible because these people, I mean, don't deserve damnation. They're all good people. So the idea that they're eternally punished and tortured is more disturbing in my mind.
For dabbling in natural law.
Look, I just got buried and thrown in there. I don't even know what was happening. I was in Boston.
And such a great moment when Ellie stabs Rachel in the back and then twists the knife at her spine.
Yeah, just to make sure she's down.
Oh, it's like, just at the last minute as she kills her, turning her into Zelda. It's so fucking good.
So one of the few things we haven't touched on is another kind of mainstay, I think, for Pet Cemetery, but Victor Pascow.
Yeah.
So in the 1989 version of the film, they really beefed up his part. Like he's just one of the main characters. It's very odd. Reading the book, I'm to the halfway point, and there's already been a line saying, oh, Lewis never had to worry about visions of Victor Pascow again. So I'm halfway through the book, and he appeared basically like once for real, I think, and then another time he thinks he hears him outside his door or has like what might just be a bad dream, like he wasn't even there. So this version of the movie sticks closer to the source material, I think, where it's just a stranger he tried to save who in turn tries to help him a little bit by giving him a warning and then vanishes from the story.
Yeah. I personally, I would have liked more Victor. Not as much as the original film, where I think it almost got a little bit goofy. How much
he's
he was
just hanging around.
Yeah, like there's like almost a comedic sense eventually to him appearing.
It like turned into the Frighteners after a bit.
Yeah.
Frighteners.
But
I say Frighteners. Like
I wasn't even going to address it. I was going to let it sit there.
That has been I've been doing that for years unintentionally. Just always the Frighteners.
I will become the Frightener. I would have liked to have seen more Victor because I liked the element it brought, like that added supernatural thing, and the fact he gets a little bit dropped throughout halfway through the movie, I think doesn't work as well as it does in the book. Plus, I would have liked to have seen like the theme that Victor double downs on that's kind of lost, which is Lewis's obsession with trying to save life. It's part of why he's gotten out of the hospitals, because he can't quite take losing patients. And the idea that Victor, isn't visiting him as a ghost because he failed, but because he actually tried to help. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to get it across that, like, hey, you can't be God. Like, death happens. This is my way of repaying you for trying to save me, even though you failed.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose, and with Victor being so downplayed in the movie to the point where you could honestly kind of take him out. You really lose a lot of that with Lewis, and I think the film would have benefited a little bit more from having that there.
I will say, to the film's benefit, having Victor Pascow in his capacity as is does allow them to put in what I consider like the most Stephen King imagery possible of a door opening in the middle of somewhere it shouldn't.
I loved that so much.
Oh, yeah, that was excellent. Plus, it's like the defining image in my mind of the Dark Tower series, which, I mean, the Dark Tower series is King. Everything he writes is Dark Tower. Dark Tower is everything he writes. So to see that door image pushed out into something like this, and even the little mentions of like Cujo in the background, fulfills my need to have all of the Stephen King stories connect to exist in one giant universe.
The thing that needs to happen, there was a lot of King references in this movie.
I don't know why, but I've just decided that anytime King movies come out, they all have to be in the same universe. Like all of the 1990s King movies, that's one big King universe. This and It and fuck it, everything that came out in Netflix the last couple of years for Stephen King, that's all one giant King universe.
Randall Flagg is just off screen in all of these.
Matthew McConaughey, what are you doing here? Get out!
Why are you lisping?
My magics.
You're rolling your S's so hard, Math.
I'm not going to get into Dark Tower today. Let's drop that potato.
But isn't it amusing that Pet Cemetery is the one that uses the door imagery and not Dark Tower?
Yeah, that's frustrating. I'm going to move on with my life. There's God, the Dark Tower made me very sad. One other interesting thing I wanted to comment on, because I've seen a lot of chatter online about how the film was let down by its marketing. And I think that's a common refrain. When a movie comes out and just does okay or poorly, people like to blame the marketing. And in this case, the big twist that Ellie was the one who's going to become undead was given away in the second trailer. But if you listen to interviews with Kolsch and Woodmere, they've actually discussed that this was a pretty civil discussion to get to the point of them using it. They've said they would have preferred her not to be in the trailers.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you don't include her, how do you sell this movie? You have like a menacing cat and like a zombie ghost that appears in 2 scenes. Like there is very little to show and get people interested in this movie unless you show them part of that ending. And I think they understood that. Like, yeah, okay, you have to give something away and let them know so they will show up to this movie.
Yeah.
But on top of that, oh, go ahead.
It's not a twist. Like, it's just the plot of the movie. Like, it's a change.
Right. But it's only a twist if you've seen the original.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen any of this stuff before, then it's probably frustrating because it gives away too much information. But that's how marketing works most of the time anyways.
Unfortunately.
But the most interesting thing I saw about that, though, was the directors kind of agreed to go along with it because they said that the marketers came back to them with like hard knowledge. They had facts written down and polling numbers to prove that when people found out about the twist in advance, their appreciation of the movie and their scores for it actually went way up. Something about knowing what was going to happen before they actually sat down in the theater allowed them to adjust to this idea that the movie was going to be different and process the fact that, oh, this kid is going to die and that's going to be the big crux of the movie. Knowing all that made them enjoy it much more, so they weren't grappling with those ideas in the middle of the theater, which is a weird way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Spoilers, folks. They're good for you. Eat up.
Don't ever flip to the end of the book. I don't understand people who do that.
You don't have that compulsion? Like, I could spend 3 days reading this, or I could just find out what happens.
I get annoyed when I see a fucking panel on a comic page that's a spoiler while I'm reading. Like, god damn it, why'd I glance over to the next page?
I'm trying to raise myself to be bulletproof to spoilers. I'm just going to read all of it, so when I go into the movie and everything happens as I expect, I can just go, haha, I knew it.
Spoilers actually don't bother me that much. Like, it's very rare. I'm like, no, I want to go in blind. I know in this case, I would have liked to have been surprised in the theater, but I was already excited for Pet Sematary. But knowing the change did make me more excited because that was more interesting.
Well, there's that too. Knowing that it's not just going to be a straight retread of the original, but they're trying something different, makes this exciting. People that are burned out on remakes, I'm sure, probably appreciated the fact that, oh, good, it's not a carbon copy.
Fuck, I would have liked to have seen them go further and change even more.
You just want to remake a Pet Sematary 2.
Have you seen Pet Sematary 2 lately?
No, I have not. I've never actually seen it at all.
Oh my god, watch Pet Sematary 2. It's fucking hilarious. There's dog fucking at one point, kinda. Like, Clancy Brown is the only one who's aware of what movie he's in. Everyone else is dead serious, except Clancy Brown, who's playing it like... He's playing it like every comedy scene involving the Kurgan. Like, he's doing that performance. Like, he's in full I'm in disguise mode the entire time. Like, it's fucking delightful. That movie is atrociously, unintentionally hilarious. I love it so much.
I'm trying to go through every Stephen King movie adaptation, and there's a lot of them, so it's going to take me some time, but I'll make sure to get Pet Sematary 2 on the top of that list.
And we may get a sequel to this one, or at least a prequel or something.
Yeah, I heard them saying that.
The producer wants it.
I don't know. I'm just nervous about this because it made something like $25 million opening weekend, and I think the budget was
not a smash
20
hit.
million?
20 million.
No,
it made money, but
yeah. But even with a low budget like
modest.
this, you still probably have to double that before you break even, which I'm sure they'll hit. I don't know what the worldwide grosses are or anything like that, but I don't think this is a movie where they're going to have a giant, $100 million profit coming in, which is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, especially when horror's doing so well. Maybe this was not a very good time to release it. It's right after Us.
That was the thing. Like, Us is still in theaters, and I absolutely fell in love with that movie. Like, I want to go watch it 5 more times.
Yeah.
So it sucks because there's so many things in theaters right now, and so many big things coming up. We got Avengers and all that. How do you choose which one to go see a second time?
You release it on the day Shazam comes out, which no one expected to do as well as it did. because of
Yeah.
lack of marketing, but you can't go more polar opposite audiences than Shazam and Pet Sematary, and family films usually win out.
I think Pet Cemetery, though, since it's not all jump scares, we do have a couple with the truck and that sort of thing, should live pretty well on DVD.
I think so.
That's a
I think it'll
That's a bummer
end up
though,
having a
because
big life.
the market for DVD isn't what it was, so it's not like sequels get built off of home video the same way they used to back in the 90s. But I think more people will find this over the years as they kind of go through and review the different movies that are out there. When this hits something like Netflix, it's gonna kill. People are gonna be into it.
It'll definitely hype the profile of it up quite a bit. Especially if like they release the Blu-ray when like It Fever is starting to ramp up. And you get shit like, Doctor Sleep's coming soon and all that. So
Oh yeah.
I think I think it'll get a good life there. I think people maybe will appreciate it more over time as well.
I hope so. So I think there's only one thing for us left to discuss before we sign off, and that's what's your favorite Wendigo in movies or TV? I'll expand it because they've been in TV all over the place the last few years.
Oh, well, I mean, if we're expanding to TV, then I almost feel like it's a stupid question because Hannibal Wendigo.
It's Hannibal. It's Hannibal.
Yeah, it's always going to be Hannibal.
Well, that one ties into the theme so nicely too.
It does.
Hey, let's just make our actual cannibal the spiritual representation of cannibal monsters.
And it has the face of Mads, which is delightful.
Mads Mikkelsen with giant black horns in a business suit. In a court of law.
I will say, runner-up, Marvel Comics Wendigo.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because I was doing some research here and I realized, like, oh shit, the Wendigo's been in, like, everything. The last few years, he's been in the TV shows Sleepy Hollow, Teen Wolf, Hannibal, Grimm, Charmed, Supernatural. It was used like as the inspiration for Dark Was the Night. If you want to reach back a few more years, is in a couple different movies. Like, the Wendigo feels like it's picking up steam. This is the new hipster monster, I think. People are going to be repping Wendigo over the next few years.
And rarely is it ever accurate.
I'm going to say though, my favorite Wendigo is the video game Until Dawn.
That's a good pull.
That's my personal favorite. But I also really, really love that game. Absolutely head over heels in love with Until Dawn. I finally got a PlayStation 4 mostly just so I could play Until Dawn.
Has this entire episode existed for you just to essentially petition for an Until Dawn sequel?
I swear to God, in the movie theater, every time they're walking around the mountains and there's mentions of Wendigos in the woods, I'm just like, give them Until Dawn! Come on, you cowards! Do it! It looks like that movie already. They can do great character work. They don't mind working with Wendigos, but they didn't show one here, so they're still free to do a full-fledged Wendigo later on. Let the starry-eyed guys do Until Dawn as a movie.
Are you standing up in front of the screen giving this TED Talk?
I'm pounding my desk like J. Jonah Jameson asking for Spider-Man photos. I'm demanding this.
Give me photographs of the Wendigo.
I say that a lot at work, and no one gets it. And I have not gotten a single Wendigo photo. It's a shame.
Yet.
That's an oddly optimistic way to end this episode. Everyone at home, you'll get your Wendigo photos someday.
I take it back.
Anyways.
Don't beware the Wendigo.
Invite him into your home. Give him a nice... Feed him your neighbor.
Yeah.
I was going to say give him a nice rump roast, but then I realized no, that would have to be human rump roast, and you don't want to give that your own rump roast. Feed him to your neighbor. No, other way around. I'm sorry. Yeah. Feed your neighbor to him.
Exactly. Get rid of the neighbor. Make friends with the Wendigo. It'll enrich your life.
I want that to be the new slogan for the show. Make friends with the Wendigo.
I'll whip up a poster.
All right, folks. Well, I think that does it for our initial thoughts on Pet Sematary. Knowing me, I'll have a completely different take in 2 months and realize I was wrong about everything I just said. But for now, this will have to stand. Thank you for joining us. If you want to listen to more Box Office Pulp, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. You look up Box Office Pulp, you'll find us on there. Go ahead and add us, like us, give us a thumbs up, a high five through the internet, whatever you do. I don't care. Reviews are nice. We like likes. Anyways, folks, this has been Box Office Pulp, and that's a wrap. Now get the hell out of here. And get me pictures of the Wendigo.
And like that, he's gone.
For some reason, that combination just made me imagine Wendigo from the comics, but he's wearing tropical board shorts. and he's snowboarding. That's the mental image I always want in my head of comic book Wendigo.
I think that actually was a comic.
Was it? Oh, hell
I
yeah.
don't.
To the internet. Find me snowboarding Wendigo.
He was in the swimsuit issue, I'm sure. Him posing sexually on a beach.
All right, I typed in snowboarding Wendigo, and there's just a bunch of posters for the Larry Fessenden Wendigo movie.
Does that have anything to do with your search at all?
I mean, there's a Wendigo in that film.
There's
Well,
a Wendigo in a lot of things, but they're not snowboarding.
I mean, it's kind of. I think it's more hinted that there's a Wendigo in that movie. That's another. For some reason, people just don't want to show the Wendigo. I want to see the Wendigo, people. For real though, I mean, the Hannibal Wendigo should just be its own movie monster. They should just take that makeup, apply it to some like $2,000 budget movie, and just let them go crazy.
And we've seen it have sex, so.
This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.